project is funded by the UK government Horizon Europe Guarantee Funding Scheme, and our funding is coming from UKRI, which is the United Kingdom Research and Innovation Fund. So we are funded by the European government to be by the EU, English government to be part of this EU project. So it allows us to continue this line of research of Horizon through forward. Now, it's taken some time to get to that point. The two associated partners that you can see on this very complicated diagram are ourselves and Reading. And you can see that within this whole consortium, there are 21 different organisations, there's 15 different partners in EU, as well as in Pakistan, and a various range of universities, research organisations, all part of this project. So it's very, very complicated and big one. But for the UK, it's us and Reading University who are the people working on this. And really, the whole project is based around a relatively straightforward hypothesis, complicated by a lovely diagram. That if you have a monoculture, you have very, very simple, straightforward relationships within the soil. If you bring other crops into that mixture, you get a much more complicated relationship. And so the concept is that the diversity will increase plant health and reduce the need for pesticides compared with a monoculture system. The result of that increased plant health and below ground network will mean there's much more trading of nutrients and other things, we believe, between the two constituent parts of an intercrop. And as a consequence, we should be able to reduce fertilizer inputs, tighten nutrient cycles by using those symbiotic relationships between the two different plants as part of the project. And really what we are looking to do here is to try to investigate this on both a research scale with a university and a farm scale on your farms if you choose and want to be involved. And how are we going to be doing this? Well, there are two particular strands to this project that are important and that we're part of here. The one is that we have what are called pilot demonstration research field trials. These are done at these 9 universities or research organisations, or 6 research organisations, including at Reading University. And John and Tom are going to explain in a minute what their role and what their trial is going to be on there. What we also have is on-farm field labs, the ones that we are used to doing through Innovative Farmers at these other countries. And the idea being that we have at least 20 field labs in each country. Note about that now, you get 100 different field trials across all of the Europe and into Pakistan. And the replication and the knowledge gains by that range becomes much more useful to us than just doing it in the country. Now, totally understand, you cannot compare Pakistan and England, you can't compare Spain with England, but the research benefits we get by doing this become massively useful within the whole learning knowledge. So a lot of already intercropping being done in Denmark, for example, so we can learn a lot from what they're doing in Denmark as part of this project. Oh yes, I will send this with slides. Presentation is being recorded and will be sent on later. Okay. Egypt as well, Shamina, apologies, I work in Egypt as well. So the whole idea is that you as farmers are central to this whole project. We have an educational ability to come from this so that we can learn, we can teach other people who learn what we're doing. The researcher benefits by having the access to real life farmers. And a lot of researchers are certainly becoming aware that they need to be working with real life farmers, not the hypothetical ones that appear on their spreadsheets. And there's also phrases extension, but we know that's advisors. So advisors and agronomists who are part of this project, because you will be learning and we will be working with you to work out what's right and wrong, what can be done, what can't be done, why things can't be done. We want to make sure that the knowledge exchange that comes out of this project moves us massively forward. Okay. So that's the basis of the project. Now, as I said, there's 2 particular aspects to the field lab. Do we want to do the first of the Menti?
Absolutely.
So just before we start onto these, what I want to know, the first question we have is, how are you, or what are you already doing for on intercropping? And so Anna's going to add in the first of the Mentimeter questions.
Yeah, to access the Mentimeter, I've just put the information in the chat. Just click on the link or go to menti.com and enter the code that we have there, which is 89766757, but you can see it on the chat at the moment. And the Menti's open, and we're going to do a big reveal at the end. So I see that someone voted, so it's working.
That's good. Okay. So whilst you're all voting, Rob is asking a question.
Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, sorry, you lost me on that last bit. There's a link to a where and a who.
Yeah, if you could, Rob, there is a Mentimeter, which I should have mentioned right at the beginning. I'm not good at this presenting malarkey. There's a Mentimeter, a questionnaire that you could ask, in which we're asking a range of questions, just to get a feel for the knowledge base behind the people and information that you would find useful to us in this project.
So if you go to the chat, there's a link. Just click on it and go and let us know.
So show conversation, hit that button, yes?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And then meeting chat. Oh, here we go. We're on it. Got it. Right, so I can put some stuff in there then. Nice one. Okay. So what we're already doing on intercropping and legumes then, yes?
Yes, please. Yep.
Yes.
That's
right.
the one.
I'll warm up my one finger typing and see if I can get something in there by the end of the meeting. Thank you for that.
No worries. And we already have 20 people that have voted. And again, we're giving you the results at the very end, just to not mess with the flow.
Yeah, which I've already messed with by forgetting things.
Yeah. I love that James is saying the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, so in this very relaxed manner, I'm now going to hand over to the real experts, which is John and Tom at Reading University, to explain to you their part of this project and the trial that they are running at Reading University. So on to.
Thanks, Jerry. Morning, all, and thank you all for turning out this morning. I'm based in Reading, and the picture behind me wasn't taken this morning, but it might have been. It's certainly a cold and snowy morning here in Reading, and it's so great to see so many of you joining this, and the sort of interest it's obviously piqued amongst you. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of some of the work that we've done already at Reading, and I appreciate that there are people on the call that will have interacted with, as Jerry said, the Diversify project, and have some experience of these types of trials and intercropping already. But for those of you that may be new to this, to sort of give you some data and idea of what can be achieved when intercropping sort of cereals and legumes together in the field. So I'm going to give you a couple of slides on some of the research we've done at Reading over the last couple of years, and then Tom's going to talk about the research that we are doing as part of this Leguminose project in a little bit more detail in terms of the research trials we'll do at Reading, and then we'll hand back to I think Jerry and Norman will talk more about then how you can get involved and the type of things we're looking for on farm. So for those of you who may not be familiar with intercropping, I've listed some potential benefits and barriers here. One of the key benefits is it lends itself to increasing on-farm biodiversity, both in cropping, but also in terms of pollinator resources, for example, and habitats and spaces for beneficial insects and pollinators to find resources for in the fields. It can be a more resilient cropping system. You've got two crops there. They can alter the microclimate around each other and help resist some of the pressures that we're seeing more commonly now in our weather systems. There is potential to derive higher yields and higher quality, especially in the cereal crop, and as a consequence of having the legume there, there's obviously a potential to reduce our reliance on nitrogen fertilizers, which over the last 12-18 months that's certainly been a cost pressure. And then just preempting some of the challenges and barriers that have been highlighted through previous projects. You've obviously got a mixed agronomy in the field. There's also a lack of sort of general knowledge about how you do this. It's practiced very widely in large parts of the world, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, but less so in our sort of Western cropping systems. And obviously at the end of the year, you end up with a mixed product, unless you sort of have a mechanism to separate that out. And there's potential that for the end user, who's going to take that product, how's it going to be used? So the opportunities for that need to be developed. So I've got some examples here from some work that we've been doing at Reading. And what we've got on this graph is some data about the land equivalent ratio. And that's a way of sort of quantifying the yield from this mixed type of cropping in comparison to the yields you would achieve if you were just growing the monocrop. So if you were just growing a field of wheat, how do you compare that to a mixed field of wheat and peas or wheat and beans, for example? And we do this using this formula, which calculates the land equivalent ratio, and that's the yield of the sole crop, so just the wheat or the beans, for example, divided by, the yield of the crop. The yield of the crop from the intercrop, so the beans or the wheat, for example, divided by the sole crop yield equivalent, and they're added together for the wheat and the beans, and we get this ratio, and the ratio is centered around 1, which is that yield of the sole crop, and then anything above 1 indicates a yield benefit, so we're getting a higher yield equivalent by growing them together than we would be if we're growing them as a sole crop. And so these 3 examples here show some beans, some spring beans, lupins and peas intercropped with spring wheat. And you can see the yield equivalent ratios for all of these are above that 1 line, indicating that there's a yield benefit to combining these 2 crops in the field. And then some data here then on grain quality. So these are these wheat bean, wheat lupin and wheat pea intercrops. And this time we're looking at the grain quality, percentage protein. But rather than in the previous slide, we were looking at a 50-50 mix of these crops. This time we've looked at different ratios. And so along the bottom, we've got 25% wheat, 75% bean, 50-50, and then 75% wheat, 25% bean. And you can see as we increase the proportion of the legume into this, we have a boost in that grain protein quality, and these are all values where we've not added any nitrogen fertilizer, and our soils at our farm are certainly not quite a sandy light soil. We don't have a lot of residual nitrogen in them, so to get these levels of protein quality from those was a real bonus for us. So that's the types of things that we've been looking at, and I appreciate many of you all also have been looking at some of these, looking at the chat, lots of examples in the chat of different combinations, and it'd be great to sort of learn from that knowledge as well that's out there in the community. So I'm going to hand over to Tom now, who's going to take you through some of the trials that we're looking at Reading as part of the next this next project.
Right, thank you very much, John. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Hopefully, you've seen the slide move on there to the next slide. I think I'm in control now. So thanks very much for your interest in potentially hosting a field lab as part of this Leguminose trial. Building on what kind of John's just showed you about some of the work that's been done at Reading already, I'd just like to kind of introduce you to what our plans are for the new field experiment that we'll be doing at the University Research Farm in Reading. And so one of the objectives of the trial is to try and identify what kind of benefit you get in that kind of land equivalent ratio that John just showed, that is due to nitrogen coming from the legume to the cereal, and what proportion of that benefit might be what I'm calling here the non-nitrogen benefit. So other things could be soil structure, could be pest and disease related, and one of the objectives of the whole Leguminose project is to try and explore some of these non-nitrogen benefits of legume cereal intercropping. So we've picked three different combinations. This is not confirmed, so we're interested in your feedback here. But the three combinations that we thinking of doing is winter wheat and fava beans, and that's because we believe that this is the most commonly used combination of cereal legume intercropping in the UK at the moment. We're looking at a spring wheat and lupin, and that's because that was the one that was performing best in some of that preliminary data that John was sharing a few moments ago. And we're also looking at spring wheat and soybean, and that's because we're sort of looking at the trend at the moment for the potential for the increased use of soybean, not just in the UK, but in Europe in general, and the desire to rely a little bit less on imported soya, particularly for feed. We're proposing that we'll do all of our treatments at a ratio of 50 to 50. But again, this is informed partly by you. So if there was great interest in looking at other ratios, we might consider changing this experimental design. We don't start until sort of October this year in anger. But the key thing that we'll do with experiments with all of these intercroppings is we'll have the individual crops on their own, and then we'll have the combinations of those crops. And for the combinations and for the cereals, we'll also have a range of different nitrogen rates. On this slide, I've referred to these as N0, which is no nitrogen, N1, N2, N3, and N4. And N3 might be what our sort of RB209 recommended rate of nitrogen. And so the idea here is that we're looking at some reduced quantities of nitrogen and also a little bit of an oversupply of nitrogen as well. And what this enables us to do is to plot graphs similar to the ones you can see on the right-hand side here. And these are hypothetical graphs. This isn't real data. So we can plot the nitrogen that we've applied on the x-axis of the graph, and then the kind of yield that yield response that we get. So this could be the land equivalent ratio, or it could be the yield of an individual one of those species. And then if that curve, that response to nitrogen that we get, if that curve is shifting to the right, then we know that shifting to the left when we grow it as an intercrop, we know that benefit is due to the nitrogen. And if that curve is shifting up, so our yield potential is increasing, then we can conclude that might be due to some sort of non-nitrogen benefit, which we'll then aim to kind of identify as part of our experiment. So that could be we can broadly call sort of soil chemical, physical, and biological health, which will have some measurements to try and attribute that to. So in addition to that, we'll be looking at quantifying all of the nitrogen losses from the system. So looking both at N2O emissions on our plots and also leaching as well. So trying to identify whether intercropping might have the potential to increase or indeed reduce kind of nitrogen losses and nitrogen use efficiency as well. And then identifying that kind of break-even point. So the point at which the additional fertilizer that we're adding only just pays for the additional yield that we might get as a result of it as well, to try and identify where's that sort of sweet spot in terms of where you're intercropping, what's the sweet spot in terms of the perfect amount of nitrogen to add to that intercrop, if indeed you are a non-organic farmer, that is a conventional farmer. Sort of within that, the science behind that is we're thinking that if you've got this legume in the soil, if there's no nitrogen, similar to what we've done in the past, then that crop is getting most of its nitrogen from biological nitrogen fixation by producing root nodules. But if we start adding mineral fertilizer to that soil to try and, for example, achieve milling quality in the wheat, then does that legume stop producing root nodules and stop fixing that nitrogen, and at what level does that do we start to observe that, as some of the key questions that we're trying to answer then. So this is just a sort of an example of what one of our experiments would look like. So we'd have several winter wheat plots where we're adding a range of different fertilizer rates, and then we've got a range of different winter wheat, in this case faba bean, intercrops, again at the same nitrogen fertilizer rates. And we're assuming here for these N0, N1, N2, N3, N4, that to the intercrop we'd be applying exactly half of the amount of fertilizer than we would to the equivalent winter wheat plots, basically, assuming it's a 50-50 mixture. I see there's a couple of comments saying that maybe 50-50 would be not optimal for some people. So we'll make some measurements at all of those plots, but we'll also make some more detailed measurements at particular plots. So the N0 plots and the N3 plots are the recommended rate plots as well. And so this experiment will not just be winter wheat and faba beans, but we'll also be doing spring wheat and lupins. I noticed there's a mistake on my slide there. It's not lucerne, it's now soybean instead. And so we'll have 99 plots in total and 45 where we'll make some of those more detailed measurements. So I think we've just popped our contact details on there if anyone wants to get in touch with us about these experiments or has any kind of follow-up questions. Otherwise, I think I'll hand over. Is it to Jerry next, I think, or will we do the next the next Mentimeter?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if there's another Mentimeter question that's popped up, so if you can, that's a free answer one, so just write in what your comments and then make as many as you feel you want to do. But anyway, so where does innovative farmers come in? And the bit we're going to talk about now will answer some of the questions that have been raised going back on the chat as well, and some of the comments, because innovative farmers, for those who don't know, is supporting farmer-led research, has done for the last 10 years. We're in our 10th anniversary. We've run more than 100 different field labs. It's been based around the principle of these field labs investigating farmers' questions on a trial which has been designed by a researcher. And then we've expanded that further into these living labs, which we're now talking at now, which is a wider spread. And with Leguminose, we want to run a UK-based field lab, which also supports the UK-wide living labs. And we're looking for at least 20 farmers who are happy to have intercropping plots looking at yield and soil outcomes. And we want to expand this research. So for the Leguminose project, as Norman's going to explain in a minute, we have a certain question that we want to be looking at and some yield, some responses that we want. But we've got scope within this lab to ask a lot more of these questions. So if you, for example, want to look at different ratios, different seed rates, different sowing widths, then we've got the ability within the field lab to do so. The only requirement is to be, we need some information, which I'm going to hand over to Norman to talk through the living labs here. So Norman is from Leibniz University, Hanover. He's running the field labs, or the living labs aspect of the project. And here is to explain what we are looking for from the project and from you to support us on this project. Okay. Okay, Norman.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. Okay.
You should be able to move your slides.
Yeah, you just.
I'll move it. Yeah.
I thought you included them to your presentation, right?
Yes, they're on. It's on the screen.
Yeah,
now.
okay, and you can continue simply with the next slide.
I think I've still got control, so I've moved it on for you.
Is it not working? I'm seeing it.
I'm seeing it, but
yeah, yeah, okay. In total, we're searching for around 100 farm labs across Europe. This is already introduced by Jerry before. And for each country, we search for 20 farmers willing to do such a leguminose intercropping field trial. So the basic aim is actually, to gain information about the regional the regional type of intercroppings which are usually used in a certain country, or information about crops which are suitable for a certain climate in a specific region. Therefore, we have not a fixed design that everyone should use a specific kind of plants for the intercropping, or specific crops for the intercropping. That's why it's up to the farmer actually what fits best and what he can sell best afterwards, and what fits best to the farm management options. Can you take then the next slide, please? Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, as I mentioned already, we have different climate regions where we have also those different crop types which are which we aim to investigate. Certainly farmers in Italy, we have different demands, like I said, in Germany or in UK, for example. That's why we are searching for this a good solution for the specific regional climate. Next, please. Next slide. Okay, the next slide, please. Okay, how should actually such a field trial look like? What we need to do, so it's actually quite simple field trial. We need the cereal as a monoculture, which is presented here in this sketch. Then we need the legume as a monoculture, and we need the cereal legume intercrop. So as it is this is drawn here in this graphics, this can be different. So here I just used for an example pine and field pea, but it depends, of course, whatever you are aiming to crop on your field sites. Next, please. During this during the cropping, during the field experiment or the farm experiment, it would be good to have a kind of monitoring of different parameters. What we need to have from the farmers are then the yields for the different stripes, so that the field experiments should be organized in stripes. Maybe I have later a simple graphic to show you how it could look like. So what we need for these 3 different stripes are basically the yields. We need some grams of your harvest to measure the crop quality. Maybe I come later on how much we need and how it should look like. And if you are able to monitor also the machinery working hours, this would be great. Fertilizer inputs are required, and of course seeding rates and seeding ratios. All this information we require, we summarize in a kind of Excel template, and the local farm supervisor is from our project is then helping you in filling out the things in the Excel template. One of the things which is kind of an additional interesting task would be the monitoring of diseases or plant diseases or pests. There is a simple crop disease monitoring app, which is called Plantix, which is developed from former colleagues of mine. It's a quite easy tool to check the crop health. So you just take a picture. So after you have installed this app, you can take just a picture from a crop which is not looking healthy, and due to the image processing and the big data pool behind, they can give you an idea about the disease if it is unknown so far. But if you're knowing these, what is triggering the disease, then you can also report it down. But yeah, next please. Yeah, we are also aiming to investigate the potential of intercropping in different management options. And here we try to compare different soil management times. So we used plowed systems or conventional plowed inversion tillage systems, and compare them, for example, to no-till systems and conventional management to inorganic fertilization to organic fertilization. So these are these three basic soil or farm management options what we like to compare, and probably like to we are probably possible to see if there are some more positive feedbacks if you have chosen a specific type of farming. So if you have a stronger benefit, for example, if you go for no-till operations, or if plowing is increasing the benefits from intercropping. So this is something we want to investigate through in this field labs. So we encourage different farmers with different management systems to be part of the farm labs. Next, please. Yeah, you can. Yeah, there are different options also for different types of intercropping. It depends a bit on the seeding technique and the harvest technique, which is available at the farm, at the local farm. So here are some of the three of the most important types of intercropping. So the first thing to the left side is the alternate row intercropping, where you see one row of a cereal and the next row as a legume. The same you can do with multiple rows, which is also quite attractive. And of course, if you want to do everything in one run, and you have also the technique, you can do the mixed intercroppings by seeding everything at the same time, at the same plot. But this also requires plants that measuring at the same time, and to be harvested all at the same time. And what's best suiting for the farmers, this depends, of course, from the available technique at the specific farm. Okay, next. Yeah, here's an example how it could look like such a farm trial. So we are aiming to have a kind of stripe, field stripes, or in UK, I learned that this is called drumline design. And so at the left side, this is an example from a living lab in Germany. The farmer have already started in November with seeding of the winter wheat in wide rows. And the next weeks he will start with seeding of the legumes. He will use lupine and soya. And here you have an example. You see that most of the field is seeded with the cereal. And there are two stripes, which are the widths of the harvester, which is the leguminose at the intercrop with lupine and a cereal, or soya as a cereal, and the legume as a monoculture in a stripe. And the rest is then seeded with the winter wheat in this case. And here's another example on the right side, how it could look like in the field. This is also a field trial from Germany with rapeseed, of different other tasks, but it should just visualize how it could look like in the field and how it could be practiced. Okay, next please. Yeah,
That's mine,
yeah,
Norman.
that's yours.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Norman, for explaining that. So really the point we're making here is that we're not requiring anyone who's involved to conform to any specific rules, other than we have intercropping and you have the true controls, one of a legume, one of a cereal at your normal farming practice. Beyond that, and we are only asking a single drumline strip of each. We're not looking for massive replication across the field. We're not expecting you or asking you to take out a whole field and put it into trials. It is very simply one area of the field that you have this trial in. You can do as you would normally do on the rest of the field, because the replication and because the science is based around everybody in the country and in Europe doing it. And so really the question then we're leading to is, what is it you really want to be doing? What are we looking for information and help from? So we know the favourite ones, the cereals and legumes, the boats, as it's known, wheat and beans, barley and peas, commonly grown in the UK at the moment. I know we've got some interest in lentils and camelina, and for those who are doing that, I'd quite like to talk, and even lentils, even within the cereal cropping, because the different strategies we have. We know that there are different types of drills out there. We know that there's these fancy drills who can drill separate crops in different rows. We know some of us have still got traditional systems where you're going to mix all the seed together or drill separate a second time. All of those options, because we have enough farmers, what we can do is, if 2 or 3 of you are doing the same thing with the same drill type or whatever, that creates a subset from which we can develop information. Researchers hate me when I get into this space, because I keep on throwing up ideas and the research gets statistically weaker and weaker. We can look at mixed rosebud. We specifically do want to look at organic and conventional people looking at this space. Some of the chat has been about nitrogen and the fact that we don't use artificial nitrogen sources in organic. But there's these questions in the conventional world that we understand that as a conventional farmer, if you can find a way of increasing the yield of your cereal without diminishing the yield of the beans, you are want to looking at it, and we don't want to stop you doing it. Nitrogen use and regional differences. I know from the people who were interested in this trial from previously, and I know we got someone on the call at the moment, certainly people from up north in Scotland. We've got people from the Cotswolds, we've got people from East Anglia. You are different regions. And so if we follow the standard farming advice practice of the last 20 years, which is basically saying, oh, if this is what you're doing, this works in Cambridge, so you've got to do it in Devon. We know that's not going to work. We're looking at breaking up into regions and working away from that. And so what we're looking at doing is trying to make sure that we learn as much as we can, which is useful to you as a farmer, and there is something that you will learn that will be of benefit to people elsewhere. Okay. And so that's the basis that what we're looking to try to do. Now, within this project, there is wider use of this data and results that we can be used. We want to feed into this information, but there's other work packages within the project. Remote sensing and modelling. It's the direction of travel for a lot of people in farming, and one of the areas that the researchers would like to know is that they know where there's an area that's being intercropped, and they know where they've got some knowledge and data coming into them, for example, about weather patterns and drilling dates and soil health. They can use that to feed in to develop a better, more manageable way of getting this IT to be a supportive tool for intercropping. Shamina, who is the project manager of the whole project, has mentioned, as you might notice in the chat, there is a little bit of work on the economics questions are going on, and we will be coming and modeling and data analysis, which again we will be asking some of you who are to get further involved into this project. But at the moment, I really want to concentrate very much on the trials and the way that you can work with us on this one. Okay, and so really just my final slide really is this is what we are asking you to do for us within this project. There were some questionnaires to farmers and advisors who asking about the barriers and blocks to more use of this and possible solutions and outcomes. And the key point about this is finding practices which become ways of getting past these barriers and blockages. We'll be running the field labs, as we mentioned, multi-regional, multi-crop, multi-practices accounted for in that one. But we also want this to be a knowledge exchange experience and a way in which we can develop that knowledge. And people hear some of the stuff we've been talking about in the chat, and you're already much more experienced, but who else knows about that? Who else is benefiting from your skill and your knowledge and experience? And I want to take this opportunity to move that forward. So looking to have on-farm peer-to-peer learning sessions, which I'm calling practice orientated, but we also want to have meetings and site visits looking at what you do with the crop when you've got it. How do you separate it out? How do you feed what you produce? What other techniques have we got? So that if you grow an intercrop, what do you do with it? It's very simple to grow it. If you've got a herd of cows or a flock of sheep, you can feed it to them. But what happens? Is there a marketplace? Can we find a way of developing that market? So I really want to be looking at those areas as well as part of this project, so that the reason that you guys have been told you can't do intercropping, we can find a way of stopping that being happen to make it more practical. Okay, so that's really what we're asking from you. It was a question about payment. The funding for this project that comes to us, great smile there, involves payment to farming for involvement, payment for testing, payment for various other work. So we haven't put a number on it yet because there's an awful lot of questions there. But in keeping with what the Soil Association and Innovative Farmers does, if you host a meeting, we pay, because you are taking your time, and we will certainly be paying on the same sort of basis of that for your involvement, because we know asking you to drill a strip with something different is taking your time or your staff or your contractor's time. Taking samples of grain out of the combine is taking your time. We will do the collection and sending off, but we know we're asking you to do something, and so therefore we will be paying you as part of your time in this project. So how much, I'm not going to say it loud. We'll have that conversation when we get there, but there is funding available for your time on this European funded project. It's not something we do for innovative farmers projects, but that's something that we are doing for this European funded project. Okay, so that's the last of the slides. I am going to unshare. We should be able to do that, shouldn't we?
And I've moved the last slide as well.
You've moved the last slide. Okay, that's great. So we'll go back to being able to see each other now. Are there any questions from you? That I hope there's lots of questions. There's plenty of opportunity of time now to ask us questions. John, this problem is obviously not an experiment, so John Paulsey.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. It's been brilliant. Thank you so much. I've been scribbling down loads of other thoughts that have just jumped into my head just from all the discussions that have been happening. But I was just going to make the point that in an organic situation, we find, and it was really interesting to see your land equivalent ratio and pretty much all the things was 25% cereal and 75% legume. But in an organic situation where we're really trying to de-risk the situation of any one crop doing badly against disease, and in the point in the rotation that we're putting that legume in, it's usually the bit that we want to build a little bit of fertility, is that if we put in a low rate of cereal and the beans do really badly, then we just get a bad yield of the cereal. So to be honest, you know, we want to give each crop its best chance of doing well. So if the beans do badly, at least we get a decent cereal. If we'd only put in 25% cereal, we'd get a poor crop of beans due to whatever disease it gets, and then we'd also get a poor crop of cereal. So I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, John, I'm absolutely aware, and that's why I know the comment was made earlier about the PGR recommendation of 25% cereals in the beans, because they're trying to produce a bean crop. If you're trying to produce, if you're trying to de-risk, which is what you're saying, as John was saying, you know, that's why we said effectively 50% is what we would be expecting. But there's degrees of flexibility. If you've got a variable rate drill, within the trial, there's no reason that you couldn't break your tramline down into a couple of different seed rates, because that would help your knowledge gain and be useful for our project as well. So a lot of conversations, a lot of stuff to be sorted out eventually, but the principle is there. Tim was next. No?
Oh.
Okay, Paul.
It was just to say thanks, Jerry. Fantastic presentation by everybody. It was just when I saw the sponsor list of DSV being one seed producer, surely what we're trying to achieve, can we not approach and speak to others? Because obviously this is a fairly fundamental project, not only for the organic market, but obviously for the conventional. And I'm sure the seed houses would love to be part of it. You know, we're talking about costs. How can we get in there, and how can we work with these guys to come up with blends? Then it leads on to other conversations that we've been having with AHDB, you know. So how far do we want to go with it? I just see it that we ought to be knocking on these doors, Jerry. Happy to help out where we can with the contracts that I've got, you know, to bring it all to the table if need be.
Yeah, absolutely. DSV are one of the partners of the whole project as a whole across all of Europe. But part of my role within this project is to expand the, there's something called a snowball throwing concept of developing people. So we start off with one person who then talks to two people who then talk to four, to try and develop these industry stakeholder groups in order to get, it's fine as farmers doing brilliant stuff and doing all this. What happens with what we produce? What is the right mixtures? Get these guys involved. Agrovista, for example, an agronomy company, have got trials they are running. We are talking with them about hosting a meeting at their site. So we can see that. That's the basis in which I want this to be going. It becomes not just farmers talking to farmers, but the whole industry just talking to each other. That's really where I want this. We as the project aim is to make that become the basis of where we go.
Yeah, it's just from doing PGRO, the bean yen for the conventional side and the organic, you know, they're keen to have a look at it as well. So again, that more interaction to, you know, to try and take it further, you know, down the line so people can understand. So yeah, happy to have a offline chat, Jerry, wherever.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Tim, another try.
Oh, well done. I'll press the right button this time. I was just trying to understand. So I came in a bit late, but the actual. So if you do the trial and you want to get like accurate weights, do you take it away for weighing, or have you got to have weighers on farm? Or?
Various ways. Again, there's a flexibility in this for those people who have got weigh cells and you know, satellite weighing and whatever it's called on their combines. We can use that data. If not, we're discussing what we will do is probably one of the team will come in and actually sort of sample meter square blocks in order to get a representative yield and do that. We don't want to make it impossible for the guys who haven't got the big fancy tools to be able to be part of this project, because you're as useful to us. So we will, once we're into it, the protocols, we will develop the whole protocols. But really what we just want, we're looking to get farmer involvement. We don't want to put barriers in the way of you being involved through tech.
So you would take the whole mixed sort of sample and then clean it and work out yield from
by having the three strip, you have the two monoculture strips and then the one mixed crop strip. So we'll take a bit of each, and they're actually going to be sent to Germany for samples. So everything will be sampled through the same lab, so that we can get rid of that variation you get from different labs using different pieces of equipment. So That's just the only criteria we have of this, to have a strip of each, the two monocultures at your normal rate and a mixture, and we will find a way of getting those samples to be useful. That's the
Okay, cool.
Yeah, let me just add to this point. If you harvest a mixture of crops, so we just need a sample of, let's say, 500 grams of this mixture, or of course from the monocultures as well, and we will send it to our partners from DSV, and they separate the mixture, and then we analyze also the crop quality on the individual parts, and then we can also calculate the percentage of the cereal and the legume in your harvest. So that's the plan.
Okay, Andy H. And I need to highlight, Andy is obviously delighted you're here, because with your Nuffield scholarship on this, consider you to be the expert. So Andy, please.
I don't think anyone's the expert, to be honest. Just a quick point on the yield mapping with combines. They doesn't really work for intercropping, because you can't put this correct setting in. It's not beans, or it's not oats, it's not wheat. So be very careful trying to use yield maps, yield weigh cells on for intercropping. That's just a comment.
Okay.
The other one, the biggest, I think the biggest barrier to intercropping is probably the separation.
Yeah.
Is there any budget or plans to do anything investigating separation on farm?
The budget we have, that's one thing that we can do with some of the budget that we have on a smaller scale. I need to be talking with some of the processors in this space to find out how they would want to use this information, but certainly that is one of the barriers I'm seeing, and one of the areas I want to investigate. Yes, definitely, because I totally agree, that's the biggest barrier I can see to its wide-scale use.
Thank you.
Yeah, in this case, of course, just add a comment. Is there actually a need to separate it? Now, as Jerry explained already, if you use it, or if you have if you can use it by yourself for feeding, for example, then there is no need to separate it. But also most of the mills, they have the possibility to separate it. For them, it's quite easy. I mean, they separate stones and everything from it. So usually there should not be a big problem, but it's clear it must be found somehow a solution for it. We need to contact the mill or whatever who is interested in, and check if there's a possibility. But yeah, this should be a major task here.
Yeah, it's certainly an area that we want to look at. A couple of questions I'll just pick up on. There's a question of whether we can include living mulches and forage crops into this. I would love to, but we have decided within the project that it is about growing combinable crops to separate, or as a combined crop. So having living mulches can certainly be part of the sort of sub trial within this, but we sort of wanted to not look at the forage side of this. But if someone has got some living mulches and we want to do intercropping into that, it'd be a brilliant secondary aspect of research that we could do. And I would be delighted to look at it, but at the moment, that's the limit. Maize and climbing beans, again, a brilliant potential project that we've been talking about. I've only seen it done as a forage crop, but it is a trial that we have been talking about doing as an innovative farmers trial on and off for some time. And if your Maize Growers Association are interested, I will talk to them separately about that. It sort of doesn't fit into the combinable crops part of the trial that we want to do. Andrew Trump.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. It's really just coming back from the market perspective on bicrops.
Yeah.
You know, we do have people that grow them. We market the crop for them, and broken beans, particularly in wheat, do cause us a challenge. In fact, this week I had one of our customers asked whether the wheat had been grown as part of a bycrop because bean chippings in the sample has caused some problems. So, you know, there is a need to have this conversation with customers. There's also a need to ensure that the sample that we're putting in is appropriate for the mill. I appreciate that if you're feeding it on farm, that's not such a problem. But similarly, we've had dairy farmers, you know, who have challenges in setting up their own feeding equipment to cope with both cereals and pulses because of the different sizes of the grain and the way that goes through their roller mill. So, you know, I appreciate it would be good to have customers being a little bit more flexible, but the reality is that at the moment they're not.
I'll follow that up. Actually, I'm aware that one of the major feed companies has been talking with a group of organic farmers about taking bycrop from them as a, but they have to have a load a month or a load a week or 100 ton a week or something, so that they can get that consistent flow through their mill for a period of time, not just the odd load. So there are conversations, and as I said, that's part of this project, is to try and develop ways to looking at this issue. Cleaning and separation has to be part of the conversation along that line, without a shadow of doubt. Yeah. Any further questions? There's no one else got a hand up. If anyone has got any further questions, please.
Jerry, I think one of the questions that we've not answered yet is when we're going to start.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If you've got the ability to start now and you haven't drilled and you would like to be involved, we'd be delighted to make a start now. We hadn't presumed people would be able to this year because of ordering seed and the like. I do know of one person who is planning to drill a section this year because it fits into his rotation in the field he's working on. If not, we mentioned autumn cereal, the bean and oat options, or next spring. So really, whichever works for you. If you want to be involved now, delighted to have you along. Delighted. Otherwise, we will wait until next spring, which is a sensible, you know, maybe sensible to ask people to do things in 12 months' time, rather than asking you to sort of change things now. But if you've got the ability to do it now, we're happy to start. Rob.
Hang on.
Yeah,
I'm field block cropping these mixtures anyway, as opposed to having a monocrop block and then putting the mixtures in a strip. So if I just took a sample out of a field block, is that any good to you?
I'll talk to you separately, Rob, on that. Yeah. Doug, welcome from Scotland. Is it snowing there? Because it's snowing in Bristol.
You're muted. Oh, Doug, he's muted.
Doug, you're muted.
Morning, everyone. I was just wondering if there are any pointers on where you go to regarding the evening up of maturity dates on, but specifically with varieties. For example, there's a huge amount of varieties of peas, and do you go to your seed merchant, or do you have evidence as far as what varieties you can use to actually close up the harvesting dates so they mature at the same time? For example, I've grown oats, peas, and oilseed rape before in the past, and it was a great crop, but the spring oilseed rape was slightly late. Or do you just go to seed merchants as far as that's concerned for advice? Andy's probably got more of an answer on that.
I think this is, I would say, this is probably one of the questions that we're actually wanting to answer as part of this, because within the group working together, what varieties work, what don't. I don't have any knowledge of someone else's knowledge. Again, that's where this team, one of the benefits of innovative farmers type field labs is you get that conversation going on. And I know you're based up in the north, so you'll have different, perhaps even better suited varieties there. But if anyone's got any experience, then we'll be happy to share your knowledge on that. But I think it's maybe this is one of those questions we need to ask. We could do this internally within the project. So what variety you're going, and that comparisons, and we can learn a lot by these sort of conversations. At the moment, I'm guessing the educated guess is hopefully your seed merchant knows what he's talking about. Which,
thank you.
And just talking about building on previous knowledge, the Diversify project did create a tool to sort of help you select varieties and crops that go well together. I've just checked online. That tools doesn't seem to be up at the moment and running. It's gone down to a default website. So maybe we'll follow up with them and see if that can come online and we can take some knowledge from there.
I think Doug was part of that project actually, but also you were part of another research project in Scotland as well, I know. So I don't know whether that information from there. Doug, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I think I was involved with that project as well, but and I can remember that, but obviously it's not available anymore. But that's why the other question I was asking, as far as are you pulling together some of the past research done, because there's quite a bit of past research done to amalgamate it for help for the participants in this scheme to be able to get pointers to where to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things we talked about in a partner meeting earlier this week is having a presentation by one of the other partners about past research in Europe. So definitely a question of whether, I don't know, Shamina's there, can we have farmers come into that meeting as well, Shamina?
Yeah, if they want, they can come. But I just want to add the things that this modeling partner, the World Package 6, they are already aware of these software which you are speaking in Diversify project, and they want to model something which is more user friendly, and also adding as much as possible criteria, so you can have you can choose the best kind of mixture for your farms based on different phytoclimatic conditions. That's why this is the idea that we choose different 25 living labs or the on-farm trials in different countries. And also we have two different work packages, which is one is on social science. So we also do a behavior change study. We will also interview the farmers, not just the farmer, different stakeholders in a value chain, that what are the barriers, and we will do the lock-in study and all these things. This will come up in next 2 months, and then business model, economic stability analysis and everything. So we just started, so everything will come up slowly, and we will put the things together. So stay tuned, you can participate, and we will do things in these 4 years. So I think not only the farmer, other stakeholder, if you want to involve them, if anybody want to involve voluntarily, we are most welcome, and you can also participate in different meetings if you think that it's interested. It is help you for building the living lab in your trial. So most welcome. So you can join the meeting anytime if you are available.
Okay, great, thank you. Tim, have you got any further question?
Yeah, is there any other point that probably needs to look at is also that I found with the human consumption market that you end up with gluten free and not gluten and all the allergens in there, and I think that probably
I've been talking with I'm talking with Josiah at Overdoves. That's one of the questions that we have. So it's not a simple. We're aware that there's barriers and there's issues that we have to deal with. So absolutely right.
So if we create a set of recommendations, it's as well as the agronomic recommendations, it's the tolerance, or intolerance, and
absolutely, that's great. Just because a lot of people are saying they have other research and other, if you want to either send me the contact details of who to talk to, or send me the research that you've got at some point in the next, whatever, then it means I'm not chasing around trying to find out who the right person to talk to, because then the right person is, I've already got that name, and that would be helpful to develop this whole national strategy, if you like, policy position that we're looking to do as part of this project. Okay. Thank you, Andrew. We done?
Jerry, so
yes, Tom.
Maybe David's question is maybe a good one to end on. Basically, after today's call, how do we keep updated and participate? What's the next step?
Yeah. Okay. So the next step from this will be we want to then get an idea of who wants to be involved. So we will send you the information about this meeting, including a copy of the presentation. We will then be arranging a meeting for everybody who's interested. It may be on a regional basis, or it may be one big super meeting for everybody. We would like to do it. Have we had an answer to that, Menti? Anna, on
Do the launch. Sorry.
Where?
Yeah.
We would like to have a proper meeting to meet up. I've mentioned the AgriVista trial site. I've been talking to them about possibly hosting it there. I know Reading has got their trial site as well, so we might do it there. And also, as aware, there's it's a long way to travel for you to come down to a meeting in Reading, so we may try to find somewhere up in the north as well to meet up different groups of people as part of the whole range of things we want to do. So the next step will be another meeting where we sort of drill down into the details of the protocols on that. That's the intention from us. Haven't been able to put a date on that one yet, and well aware how busy it gets during the summer with groundswell and cereals and the down to earth programs and all the rest of it. So we will endeavour to find a date that works for everybody. But that is the intention of this project. I will also be in touch with people who've asked, some people who want me to contact them, and I'd like to talk to you all at some point if possible. And so that's the next step, will be a meeting where we can clarify exactly what we're doing. Today was an introduction, a talk through and develop interest.